Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this Scrutiny Commission. It's Growth and Regeneration, and it is actually the first scrutiny meeting that we've done via Zoom. So all the challenges are ahead of us this evening. I'd like to, first of all, for those of you who don't know me, there are some speakers in the room as well. So my name is Paula O'Rourke. I'm a councillor in Clifton, and I'm the chair of this scrutiny. I do want everybody to introduce themselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the participants list and ask people to unmute themselves and just a very brief introduction. I'm going to go through it as the list in front of me, and I'll just say who I need to introduce themselves and the name of the second person so that we're ready, unmuted and ready to go. Okay, so first of all, the co-host is Bronwyn. And after that, I'm going to ask Tom to introduce himself.
You're muted, Bronwyn.
That's okay.
Apologies. I'm Bronwyn Falconer. I'm a scrutiny advisor and I'm supporting the meeting.
Okay, and then Tom and then Sarah.
Councillor Tom Brooke, Bishopston and Ashley Down.
Okay, Sarah.
Hello,
and then Fabian. Sarah O'Driscoll and then Fabian.
Sarah O'Driscoll, I'm the service manager for strategic city planning and I'm doing a later agenda item.
Thank you. Fabian and then Mark Weston.
Hello, I'm Councillor Fabian Burkles. I'm the Councillor for Troopers Hill and I'm the Vice Chair of this commission.
So, okay, so Mark Weston and then Elaine.
Hi, I'm Councillor Mark Weston. I'm the councillor or one of the councillors for Henbury and Brentry in the north of the city. Thank you.
So Elaine and then Tim.
Hi, I'm Elaine Alford. I'm Head of Housing Delivery.
Tim and then Paul Smith.
Hello, I'm Tim Rippington. I'm a councillor for Brislington East.
Thank you. And Paul and then Tim Ward.
I'm Paul Smith, councillor for Central Ward.
Thank you. Tim and then Zoe.
Hi, I'm Tim Ward. I'm the Housing Strategy and Enabling Manager.
And Zoe and then Kevin.
Hello, I'm Zoe Wilcox. My job title is Director Development of Place.
Thank you. Kevin and then Nicola Beach.
Yeah, Councillor Kevin Courtley, one of the ward councillors for Bishopsworth.
Thank you. Then Nicola and John Wellington.
Hi, thanks Paula. I'm Councillor Nicola Beach. I'm a councillor in Bristol East, in the Central Ward. I'm also the Cabinet Member for Planning and City Design.
Thank you. So it's John and then Martin Fodor.
Hi, I'm John Wellington. I'm one of the councillors for Windmill Hill Ward.
Thank you. So Martin and then Alex Minshall.
Hello, Councillor Martin Fodor, one of the councillors for Redland Ward.
Thank you. Alex and then Mark Bradshaw.
Hello, I'm Alex Minshall. I'm Sustainable City and Climate Change Manager at City Council and here for an item later on the agenda.
Thank you. And then Mark and then Nick Smith.
Mark Bradshaw, Councillor for Bedminster.
Thank you. Nick and then Clive Stevens.
I'm not here for that long, mate.
Hi, I'm Nick Smith, the Council's Intelligence and Performance Manager. I'm here to present item 8 on the agenda.
So, and then Clive and then David Redgewell.
Hello everyone, I'm not on scrutiny, I'm just asking a question and then making a statement later on. I'm glad to see the big guns are here to answer my questions.
So then David and Tom's already introduced himself because I thought that was going to be Tom, who's the Dem Services guy. So David Redgewell.
David Redgewell, and I'm a transport lobbyist, but also on the Mayor's Transport Board.
Okay, thank you all. I think that's everybody. I'm not sure if Tom from Democratic Services is still here. Do we have any apologies for absence or any substitutions? Hello? I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry, Councillor Johnson's just given her apologies a moment ago. And Stephen Peacock, who's the Director for Growth and Regeneration Directorate.
Okay, and then any declarations of interest? Any? No? I'll take silence as assent. The next item on the agenda is the annual report. So essentially, this is something that would have happened if we hadn't had COVID. We would have had a real meeting, and we would be nominated as chair and vice chair and everything set up. But that sort of happened in full council in July. So this report is simply just to note the terms of reference, to note the membership of the commission, and to confirm the dates for the scrutiny commission. And actually, the dates for the next two meetings have been left to be decided at the moment, because from our experience last year, there were issues with, we decided dates and then they didn't fit in well with budgeting and things like that. So those dates will be decided fairly soon.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So chair's business, I really don't have much to say, except I think it's probably just an opportunity for me to talk a little bit about how we manage this meeting for people. If everybody keeps themselves on mute until they want to speak, the best way to let know that you want to say something is to put your hand up in the electronic manner, because then at least I can monitor the order that they come up in. And also, I did say earlier, we do have a fairly packed agenda. I'm very pleased that members of the public are here and attending. I don't know if Suzanne Audrey, I've not seen her in the list yet, so I don't know whether she's here. If somebody could just make sure that she's not trying to get into the room. I don't see anybody trying to get in.
No. But
I know that we've got Clive and David who have questions, and we've also got statements. So we decided that it would be best to let the visitors all be in for this part of the meeting. So that's it, really. So we go straight on to the public forum. Are you able to share?
Sorry,
Yeah.
I did have my hand up. Could I just say about the terms of reference before you shoot on?
Oh, you did have your hand up. Yeah.
My name is missing from the terms of reference.
Oh, that's an oversight.
Ah.
Thank you.
Jin, I have to apologise for that, because I copied the names from last year's report, but of course you weren't a member then, were you? That's an oversight on my part. I'm sorry, I forgot you weren't a member this time last year, were you? I shall add you to that. Apologies, councillor.
Okay. And the one caveat about the fabulous idea of looking at the participants is that the screen doesn't allow all of them, so I'll have to scurry up and down a little bit. So if I do miss you out, or if I'm being tardy, do just drop me a line in the chat. Okay, so let's get on to the public forum. So the first, are you able to put it up there, or should I just go through on my other screen?
Yeah.
Oh, Suzanne Audrey.
Bronwyn's going to share her screen with the public forum on.
Oh, so Suzanne Audrey has emailed to say she's not coming because she thought that she wouldn't have any supplementary questions.
Oh.
So that's a pity. That's maybe we could just make a note to make sure that people are aware of the fact that they would have been able to.
I'll speak to her. I don't know why she thought that.
Okay. So the first questions are from her. The first two questions, I think, were from Audrey, weren't they?
Yeah, I'm struggling to share our screen, I think, aren't you? I can tell.
Okay, I've got the public open. I've got the document open.
If you want to, I can open
So we've got, so if Suzanne Audrey isn't attending, we just bypass her questions. Okay, that's for now.
Yeah.
And Clive does have questions. So Clive, you have question 5, and you have the right to a supplementary. I'm not sure if you were here at the beginning when I said that Paul Smith, who is not the Cabinet Member for Housing anymore, won't be able to answer supplementary questions. So the supplementary questions should be directed at Zoe, and hopefully she'll be able to answer them. But if not, then they can either be answered in the substantive item in the main meeting, or you'll get a written response afterwards. So Clive, over to you. Do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you, Zoe, for preparing the answers to this. I'm pleased that the trend for affordable housing is on the up, even though it's had some hiccups for various reasons. But that needs to be seen in context with the demand to see whether we're actually getting close to what's actually needed. And I've had a chance to analyse these answers, so thank you for getting them out. Overall, I'm using the, if you move down a little bit to the answer, that's it. The number that's 30,600, which is for the 4 local authorities, but of course, a huge amount of that is for Bristol, being the biggest population. So that works out as a demand for 2,000 a year for shared across the 4 authorities. It seems that planning only planned for 80% of that. So that's dropped off 400 a year. So I'm wondering what happens to the people that need that. The 7,000 is around about 450 a year for Bristol, but most of the rest, or much of the rest, is for Bristol too, and that is 500 or so for Bristol. So my questions are as follows. The first one is, and it informs me, ready for my statement actually. In the very last line, you talk about the duty to cooperate, where the other 3 local authorities are really helping Bristol out. The new planning white paper talks about removing the duty to cooperate. Can you, Zoe, I can't see you, but I'm assuming you're there. Are you able to give me an indication as to whether that is a good thing or a bad thing regarding people that need affordable housing in Bristol?
Chair, would you like me to answer?
Yes, please.
Okay, Councillor Stevens, the answer is linked to the replacement of the Joint Spatial Plan with the SDS, the Spatial Development Strategy. And so already South Gloucestershire, Baines and Bristol, along with the West of England Combined Authority, have said they are committed to working up that document together. So arguably the duty to cooperate isn't as critical because we're already going to do that joint high level plan. We need to revisit the evidence. And so some of these numbers need to be revisited and updated, although probably the situation is it's unlikely to have got any better. And chances are those numbers will likely to be increasing. So the duty to cooperate issue is relevant to North Somerset. And our understanding is, and certainly their commitment, albeit they're not in the SDS, have committed to work alongside the 3 UAs and WECA to look at the housing need across the sub-region. So the commitment and intention and recognising the role of Bristol in the sub-region and where the need comes from, or along with the other authorities, that there. So, and also the duty to cooperate reference in the white paper. As we know, it is a white paper out for consultation and we'll be picking that up later on the agenda. But at the moment, we have to work on the basis it is still a requirement. But as I say, the processes we've got in place very much accept and go back to the JSP, where it was recognised that it was looking across the West of England area to address our total number of houses required, but also the affordable need across the sub-region.
Okay, thank you. So to summarise for my benefit and anyone listening, all those crowds, really, because we're in WECA, there's still a duty to cooperate, and the only one where things might be a little bit more dubious is North Somerset. Okay, so that's question 1. Question 2 is also planning, which is also in the white paper, which is the next, comes the idea of taking 25% of the developer money away from affordable rented housing and using it to subsidise purchases, people buying houses a bit cheaper. How would that affect our ability to meet the numbers?
That is likely to cause an impact in the West of England because our housing need is actually for social rent, and all those figures that we're talking about and that response, but also when we do the refresh, will be actually the need will be identified as social rent. It doesn't mean that subsidised right to buy like shared equity hasn't a role to play, but it doesn't get to what we call the actual need that's identified. And those people who can't buy a product on the market.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. So just to summarise, the loss of duty to cooperate is not as harmful in the WECA area as it might have been, but the loss of 25% of developer money will have a big impact on provision of social rent affordable housing. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll wait in the waiting room until it's ready for my statement.
Okay. No, you can stay in the meeting. Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, Chair, is it possible I can ask a very quick question about that answer?
Say that again? Question on a question.
Quick question about the written answer.
For Clive?
Yes. Just where it
And
states...
question.
Where it states about affordable rent, does that mean 80% of market rent rather than 80% below market rent?
Okay, quickly, yeah. You're muted now.
I think probably Zoe to confirm, but the way I understand it from the MPPF is it's 80% of market rent, Tim, so you're right, or less than 80%.
I think the written answer is unclear or incorrect.
I'd agree with that, but I made the assumption you did too. Thank you.
That's correct, Councillor Stevens.
Okay. Sorry, can everybody hear? I've moved because I thought I was going to be in a better location, and I think I've just made things worse. Can people hear me better?
I can hear you fine.
That's fine. Can everybody else hear me? I hope so. Okay, so we now need to move on to statements. And the first statement is from David Redgewell.
Hello.
Hi, David. So do you want to have a couple of minutes to speak to your statement?
Yes. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, I really want to raise the issue of transport and public transport. As you can see, WECA did a review of North Bristol's bus services with Stagecoach recently, which has been quite successful in the Southmead Parkway, Severn Beach, Avonmouth, Sharhampton areas. Well, that's good because they just ignored the South Gloucestershire boundary and reviewed the buses and put them in to suit the community. Now, what we're really needing is very urgently, because buses are now funded by the Department for Transport under COVID-19 operating grants, is a review of East Bristol, but particularly South Bristol. I'm horrified at the moment. We've only got 2 hourly bus services, and I'll stress that again for Zoe's benefit. 2 hourly bus services across South Bristol through some of the most deprived parts of the city region. That's Brislington to Knoll and Hengrove. And then between Bristol and Bath through St George, there's 4 buses a day. And that's where we are at the moment with regards to the money coming in from the Department for Transport through WECA. Now, if we're to develop a city's recovery of an economic plan, which the Metro Mayor and the Mayor both have to do. The Bristol one will feed in to the WECA Mayor. We had a briefing at the Transport Board about this a few days ago. Then public transport is absolutely essential at the WECA level to deliver the plan-made approach to housing, to regeneration, to the WECA strategy that Zoe's just referred to. So I am concerned that the public transport is not keeping up together with the growth and with the regeneration. I understand where we are at the moment. It's costing us £27 million a week of taxpayers' money to maintain buses in England, but nevertheless, WECA is spending £6 million of that on local services. I think there's an awful lot of services in South Bristol that do very strange things in the Brislington area, in Stockwood, in Whitchurch. They don't cross the boundary into Baines, and really we need a bus review to sit around the housing and the development. So that's really what I'm pushing for, along with probably trying to speed up some of the rail development. And I'm horrified we still don't have Portway Park and Ride. I think we've got planning, but we still haven't got delivery and building at Sharhampton. We really need to get on top of this transport issue. I think one of the other issues I highlight to this committee, we still have far too many officers working in Bristol City Council, South Gloucestershire and Baines that should be really working for the Metro Mayor. If we need an integrated transport authority, we need to put the officers over into the right authority, irrespective of what the mayor is. And finally, to make it work for Clive's point, all the transport lobby groups and the unions have come to one conclusion: we can't have a three-legged stool. The government needs to get North Somerset into WECA. Otherwise, we're never going to do the regeneration of South West Bristol, because most of the land will be in North Somerset, and therefore the regeneration will be much more difficult in the Hartcliffe, High Ridge, Bishopsworth area in towards the new development land. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, David. Thank you very much. We have one more statement, and that's from Clive. So
Are you ready?
Statement for a minute?
Yeah, I don't know if Paula's frozen or if I've frozen.
Clive may have already
I think
gone.
Paula, not you, Clive.
Does anybody notice Clive's gone?
No, Clive.
His statement.
Okay, so
I think I might have frozen.
yeah. Okay, looks like we're all nice and hot again. Right, so this is my statement to the Planning for No Future white paper. As you probably guess, I'm not very enthusiastic about it. In fact, I think it goes entirely the wrong way. I'm slightly assured that the loss of local authorities cooperating is mitigated a bit. But if I remember rightly, North Somerset is quite an important area for future affordable homes. And you'd need cheap buses to help people travel into where the jobs are. We heard about the issue about diverting 25% of developer money to starter homes. That was going to be quite an impact on social rented sector. I'd also like to talk about this being profoundly undemocratic. If you move to a situation where councillors or committees set up whatever a new local plan looks like, imagine in 2025, and to a certain extent we're then giving outline planning permission for lots of things without knowing the detail. And then by the 2030, 2035 even, that's when the plans come forward. Imagine being a resident in that area, or even moving to that area and then discovering someone's already got outline planning permission for something. So I think it's really bad from that as well. And finally, affordable housing in a city depends a huge amount on the price of land. Bristol is actually fortunate that we own a reasonable amount of land and we're freeing that up. But that won't last forever. And if you take off the restrictions on off of land in an area which is constrained because of green belt, the price of land will go up as developers look to put in expensive, glossy stuff and maximise their profit. That's fair enough. That's their job. So all in all, I think I'd like you to come to the same conclusion as me and make sure that we tell government based on facts that this is a complete disaster. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Clive. I'm struggling a little bit here. I have to confess, I'm struggling a little bit with technology. I've changed from a laptop to the iPad. I'm hoping that people will be able to hear me and I can hear people better from now on. Does mean that I won't be able to share the documents. However, I think we are now finished with the public forum and we're going to move on to the performance report.
Yeah.
So can we hand over to whoever's presenting us?
Yeah, Nick Smith is here. He's going to present the performance report.
Yes, hello, that's my document. Well, shall I bring it up onto the screen?
Yeah, may as well.
Please, if you could, yes.
Right, okay. Is everyone seeing the everyone seeing the Q1 performance report there?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Obviously, first thing to note is that I'm not Kate Cole. Kate Cole normally presents the performance to this scrutiny commission, but she is on leave this week. So I'm presenting in her stead. I'll go through, to be fair, there's not a lot of detail because this is Q1 and there's not that many that have got targets to go through, but we'll go through what we can. I just wanted to note the first point, which is that we've got these headline points about the 57% on target and performing better than last year. This is the point to make here, that this is based on all GNR directorate measures. And where that is particularly relevant is that the GNR scrutiny don't see all of GNR directorate because all the housing section go to the community scrutiny. So it's only a small amount that are coming through here, but the rest will go to community scrutiny when they meet. So with that in mind, there are some key points there that we've made. We've broken it down this year, and this will happen throughout all our performance reporting to officer meetings and to scrutinies and cabinet. Each section is then broken down into this split that we've brought into the performance framework this year, distinguishing between BCC only measures and citywide measures. Again, these figures are for the entire of the GNR directorate, and you'll see that it's slightly better on the BCC only measures. For on target, though, the other way for direction of travel. And direction of travel, where that is appropriate, is looking at how Q1 is this year compared to Q1 last year for the same indicator, where that they are consistent. Other than that, the key points that we've actually, rather than talking through those, if I pull up this infographic on screen, this pretty much is showing all the ones with appropriate data. I think it's fair to say that the biggest one to discuss is the affordable homes, but I know that's coming up on the agenda later in the housing delivery update. That you may want to take some comments now, as Zoe is here. Other than that, we're showing what we can here of the indicators that have got data for Q1 and targets and, as I said, direction of travel. Are there any particular points that anybody wanted to highlight of the indicators that are shown? As I mentioned, there's 8 that have got data that we can look at this quarter. Many of them obviously will have data in subsequent quarters.
So we do have some hands. So Mark Weston has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's regarding BCP C425, increase in normal, the number of affordable homes. Hope I'm in the right section. I totally understand why we think delivery will have slowed in the first quarter of this financial year. I'm just wondering, do we think without COVID we would have hit the target?
Zoe, would you like me to answer, or would you like to answer that one?
In a way, we've got a whole report on this topic coming up, which is probably where we put the context and try and answer that question.
I can wait then. I'll wait.
I think that might be better, Councillor Weston, because in a way, then we're in the context of what the data we have, and then we can work through what it could have meant.
Okay, Tim, you have a question, I think.
Yeah, sorry, I'm kind of struggling because the report doesn't always fit on the page, but the target DGRC 120 on road safety, so that's got a green arrow going up, which presumably means there have been less incidences, but there's no quarter year target. I'm misunderstanding that, am I?
Yeah, the figure is given in terms of how many incidents there were, but because there is an annual target for this, but this one isn't profiled within the year, so there's no Q1 target. The arrow is looking at the figure for this quarter versus Q1 a year ago.
Okay, so we would expect with less traffic on the roads, I'm guessing that would be down. Do we know what the difference is between this time last year and the current?
I can look that up, and maybe by the time we're finished, I could get to that.
Okay, thanks.
I can send that through via the notes that will follow the meeting.
Okay, are you happy, Tim? So I think Martin Fodor, you've got a question?
Thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of them I'd like to query. One is the BCPC 434, which is about deaths attributed to particulate air pollution. And the other one is about the investment estate, the property estate, which is after that. So we haven't got a clear strategy. Certainly, there are issues around particulate pollution. Everyone, I think, knows that now. But if there's no strategy, how is it being dealt with, is my question, because we have this target in the document for it. So what's being done, and is something being done? Is it working? And then in terms of the investment estate, we very recently updated the property strategy and the scrutiny discussions I took part in. Does that now have to be reviewed again in the light of changes to sort of city centre and high street and other issues around the city in the light of COVID? Does that mean the investment estate is going to let us down in terms of income generation? Is someone looking at that? Thank you.
Okay, so who's going to answer those questions? They're both to...
They're quite separate questions, aren't they? First of all, the one regarding particulate air pollution, that's not on the screen at present, so it'll be one we don't have a Q1 data for. Now I know Alex Minshall is on the call, though I don't know whether he's active currently, and he may be best placed to comment on that.
Yes, Chair, I can if that's helpful.
Thank you. Yes, please, Alex.
Yeah, so the particular target there is a public health target that's derived from data analysis undertaken by Public Health England, and estimates the public health impacts of particulate pollution in the city. Our plans at the moment the city is compliant with the standards on particulates. We are expecting some potential changes to those national standards through the Environment Act, although we're just waiting on the details of that. And it's possible that targets may move. In terms of the plans that are in train at the moment, they're principally targeted to address where the city and many cities are not compliant with the standards on nitrogen dioxide, which is a different set of pollutants, but coming from many of the same sources. And so many of the activities that reduce the burning of diesel in vehicles in the city will also have an impact on particulates. There will need to be probably additional measures around other sources of particulates, in particular around combustion of solid fuels. So people burning wood in wood stoves in the city, and also then people illegally burning wood and coal in open fires or non-compliant things within the city, which is a smoke control zone and has been for many years. So there will need to be further action. So the measures that are in the Clean Air Plan, the primary measures will help, but as we understand more about the new targets, we'll be able to bring forward additional proposals as part of that package.
Thank you, Alex. And the other question from Martin had two questions, I think.
Yes, yeah. The property, investment property.
Oh, you've had
that was regarding the increased annual revenue generation from the council investment estate. Is that correct? So that's from the economy of place division. Now there is some further detail towards the end of the report in the. So if I bring that forward in this section here, so we can just focus on that. A bit bigger. So that is the additional comments that are in this section here about the income figure to be verified and the loss in incomes, and again no in quarter target for this particular measure. However, in terms of your point, as I understand it, was more of a general point about who's looking into this and taking that matter forward. That would need to be directed to the service. I'm afraid I couldn't answer that part, but I don't.
Can I just ask a question about what's on people's screens? Because I'm not sure is everybody seeing the same thing? So well, I've got stuff about, I can't quite see the numbers, but we seem to be in a different page.
You should all be seeing, if I highlight there, where it says interim figure to be verified.
It's the down arrow in red.
Yeah, down arrow in red.
I can't see any highlighting. That's fine. Okay, yeah, I'm with you.
Okay,
Thank you.
I appreciate you can't answer all of this, Nix, but I appreciate that. But it does make me think that there might be issues that need to be scrutinised if major decisions are made around the investment portfolio, or the risk of it not being as effective as it is. And we spent a lot of time looking at the property strategy last year, so I'm wondering if we might need to think of bringing that back at some point, Chair.
Thank you, Martin. Good point. Okay, we've got a question from Fabian.
Thank you. If I just pull up the bit about BCP C541, about the increase of percentage household waste sent for reuse, recycling and composting being below average or below target. Is that simply not enough people are actually putting stuff out for reuse and recycling and composting, or is it the stuff that is put out isn't actually getting to be recycled, composted, or whatever?
I'm just trying to find the correct indicator to put up the details on. This one here, 335. No, sorry, that's the fuel poverty one.
That 541, C541. It's your management of place.
Right, thank you. Right, let's get to that section there. Yeah. Definitely different to when you've got the doing it in this process.
Mm.
I'm not seeing the that indicator there. Okay, if I come back to the top, that might make it clearer, and I'll just reduce that down so I can see better around the screen. Right, there it is.
The question really is, I suppose, I mean, it's quite a broad question about whether, what, do you know whether we can accept that it's gone down. I think everybody's read it already. So I think the question really is it because the stuff being put out in the street isn't being put out to be recycled, or the stuff at the other end, when it reaches the recycling depot, it's not good enough quality? Do you know the answer, or would that have to be?
In terms of the details beyond what was in the management notes, no, it would have to go to the service, but we can put that question to the service. I'll point out that it's better than it was at Q1, but obviously it is below the profile target as to where they were intending this to go.
Okay, thank you. I just had a very, very quick one, which is, and I'm sure I'm wrong about this, but it says 57% were on or above target, and a person could deduce, therefore, that 43% was below target. But I'm assuming that actually the real answer is because things aren't being reported in this quarter, or is that the answer?
No, it is 57% on target or above and 43%
below target.
Yes.
That's quite high, isn't it? So, I mean, I just be interesting to see over the years whether that sort of measurement is, do you know whether that changes, or is it getting better? Or?
It does change. It's better than it was last year.
That's maybe something that we could bring, because it'd be interesting to see, I'd like to see a graph with a sort of, a line of continuity on that in a future thing. So perhaps that's something that you could take that would be interesting to see generally the overall picture, whether it's progressive or whatever. Anyway, thank you very much. I think that we have to definitely call a halt to that there. It's the sort of thing that people could spend hours looking at and asking questions, but we have got a very packed meeting. So thank you very much.
Not at all. I'm happy to try and bring some more questions, some more answers to those detailed questions.
Great. Good job. Well done. Thank you very much. I think we'll move swiftly on to the risk report.
Zoe's gonna lead on this one, Paula.
Okay. Could I just ask people as well, for some reason, I'm not able to put your hands down. I did used to be able to do it, but again, tonight, it's not just allowing me. So if Mark and Fabian could put your hands down, that's really good. Thank you very much. Okay, Zoe.
Can you confirm if you can see my screen or not yet? Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just to take you through this risk report. So as you can see from the first page, this is the Q1 risk report for the Growth and Regen Directorate. There are 6 key risks that have been listed in this report. They're down there as threats. I won't propose to read them to you. You can see them. And 2 identified external and civil contingency risks. If I now take you to page 31 on the report, it sets out some detail behind them. But if I just go through them, the 2 that scored critical are the failure to deliver the affordable housing to meet the city needs, which obviously we've picked up already in a couple of questions. And the second point is around failure to meet the income targets as a result of COVID-19. So not just that's the estates and the property portfolio, that's all sorts of income that the Growth and Regen Directorate relies on that has been adversely impacted by COVID. So those are the 2 that are showing us critical risks this quarter. There are then 4 new risks, although confusingly 5 are shown there, but for the ones who've spotted, one's written twice. One of them, the new risk, is this one around income targets as a result of COVID-19. Then the Future Parks project, which is a newest project that's emerging, that's been added to the risk register. Homelessness has also been added, as has parks and space asset deterioration and failure. Those have all been added as new risks onto the Growth and Regen risk register. 2 risks are actually deteriorating. In the words, they're worse than the last quarter. That is the affordable housing one, and also issues around business continuity and council resilience, particularly around the challenges that the Growth and Regen and the council has been facing around COVID, but also numerous other continuity and council resilience issues that have obviously been tested to the extreme in this last quarter. 2 improving risks, you've got the climate change commitments there and the wider cleaner air plan. And Alex is on the call and we'll be picking those up, no doubt, when his presentation. And then one is actually closed, which I've already referenced in response to Councillor Stevens' question, which is the Joint Spatial Plan, which is now going to be superseded by the Mayoral Spatial Development Strategy. So that really is a high level. Then obviously this report takes you into an appendix, which has more text, which obviously you can read, which explains what we have done and what we are doing on all the risks. The ones that I'm just flashing through them because the ones I flagged to you are either the ones that have were red in the risk rating or identified as new. So I don't propose to go through that anymore, and I shall take it off the screen now. So in case anybody wants to ask any questions, I'm sure they can look at their own papers. Councillor Roth, you're on mute.
Sorry. 2 questions. We've got Fabian and then Martin.
Yeah, simple one on GDRR3. One of the potentials is loss of supplies. I was just wondering what impact, what supplies are dependent on, coming from Europe and what supplies are not. I think I've got something's gone wrong with my video. Sorry, I'll just turn it off. And the second one I wanted to ask was about, we talk about the loss of income, the economic shortfall. How much, what's the gap between sort of the funding we've had from government to help with COVID and the actual losses because of COVID?
Councillor Roth, would you like me to answer those?
Yes, please. Yeah.
As best I can on the business continuity one, I have not got details of what supplies. It's just been recognised that during this time, as everybody knows, getting supplies, regardless of where they're coming from, abroad or even in this country, is more challenging because so many people are either not working, furloughed, or the actual infrastructure system of the country has been stretched. So I think it's much more complex than just overseas, but I haven't got the detailed breakdown and I'm not sure it even exists. It's been flagged as a risk, and obviously in individual service areas, they've obviously had to put mitigation in place or have had to slow down doing whatever they were doing. In terms of the council income, the government has said that it will replace, I think the figure is, I haven't got any finance colleagues on here, but I think it's 70% they will reimburse for income lost.
75.
75, thank you, Councillor Weston. But that is dependent on a number of factors. You have to apply through the year and they're not actually paying that till the year end. So if you take an area that I'm familiar with, which is planning income and planning applications, there is a significant shortfall. But as the year progresses, that shortfall may be made up in part. So the government is only prepared to commit how much money at the year end. So, but the basic working assumption is 75%, whatever our shortfall at the year end on income that we were reliant on through statutory services and other services, we will be recompensed, but only up to 75p in the pound.
Thank you.
Martin Fodel.
Yes, thanks very much. I'll stick to one, which is the income topic again. The traffic and highways car parking figure under GDRR 12. What it highlights to me, and I'll link it to another item on the same kind of list further down, which is clean air. If we're so committed to raising revenue from parking, there is firstly a sort of tension with our concerns about congestion, modal shift of transport, getting people out of cars, and cleaning up the air, including, you know, tire and brake dust, which was the particulate issue as well, and the dependence on car income, parking income. Are we going to kind of suggest that really ought to be rethought? I totally understand why we've started getting kind of addicted to that income, because it was so necessary because of all the other cuts of budgets from government and so on. But it's automatically creating a tension to so many other things we're trying to do in the city around congestion and clean air and so on.
I'll answer that briefly. As part of moving forward on our transport agenda, it's fundamental that it has to be looked at hand in hand. The issue that this raised is the tap was just turned off suddenly, and at the moment it does underpin the work of growth and regen, and it underpins the work of the transport division in particular. So moving forward, as we look to reduce car parking or reduce the way we raise income in this area, we will need to think alongside about how we do those changes and how we either rebalance our council budgets or look for new areas of funding to support the transport infrastructure that's needed. So it's absolutely linked, there's no doubt about it, but actually managing it, it has to be done holistically, looking forward over probably a number of years.
Thank you.
We have something again,
final
I think we'll have to come back to.
Okay, Tim and then Mark Weston.
Yeah, thanks. I've got two questions, if I may. The first one is on the homelessness risk, and I'm just wondering at what point we see that as becoming so urgent that we need to revisit our strategy and come up with something more radical. And the second one is about the Future Parks project, which I was never tremendously enthusiastic about, but it does seem that we've had to undertake it in the worst possible time. I was wondering whether we were reliant on any income being generated at the end of that project, which we're now not going to see, because obviously the whole thing's taken place basically during lockdown when people can't come out and share their ideas and that kind of thing. Thanks.
Okay, who's going to answer that question?
Well, I don't want to be seen to be ducking it, but one of the issues we have here is those two, although this is growth and regen risk, both those are actually community scrutiny's remit. And this is the challenge. So Julian Higson is responsible for homes and landlords and the expert on homelessness, but he would attend communities scrutiny, and likewise Patsy Meller does the parks project. So I'm afraid not only am I not the right director, I'm not sure this is the right scrutiny. So apologies, but I'm sure we can follow up and get some answers to those questions. But as I say, this is the challenge we have at the moment with the Growth and Regen having two separate scrutiny, but looking at the same information.
I think maybe this is something that we need to bring back to OSM and to the leads at OSM to discuss. I suppose we could get written answers for these questions. Does that be acceptable? Tim?
Yes, thanks. Yeah.
Some written answers? Okay. I'm just going to move along swiftly to Mark Weston, and it's got to be the last one because we're pushing against the clock.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I had 2 points to make, if I may. I'll make them quick. The first one, obviously, is about affordable homes. It's red flagged, risk rating 28. I raised this in December at our meeting then. We were never going to hit 800 this year anyway. We would have had to more than double the delivery. It just wasn't. We had 348, so we weren't going to do it. Hi, Paul. And so it seems strange to me that the risk is red and 28, but the mitigation, we have it down to orange. I don't understand. We weren't going to do it before. We're definitely not going to do it now. I think that the risk rating, the tolerance risk, is going to have to be red too, and I don't understand why it's not. And the second point for me is on GDRR, Delivery of Future Parks project. I'm very sorry, but I'm going to have to pick on this one. They talk about the delivery of projects is down to funding. With the greatest respect, I've actually been waiting for a delivery of a parks project, £120,000 fully funded, and the work has not started yet, and that's been 18 months. And so there are several parks projects, I'm sure we all have them in our ward, that are fully funded and ready to go. So I'm afraid I don't think you can apply that line to the risk. It doesn't tally for me.
Okay, Mark, maybe could you write me an email and afterwards, and because this is obviously not going to sit very well here tonight, you're not going to get an answer, but equally I think you need an answer. So if you write to me directly, I will take that up with the chair of OSM and see what we're going to do about this going forwards.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
And get a written answer. Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry to rush things along a little bit, but we do need to move on. And the next item is it's showtime for Alex, and he's going to give us the climate update. And I think he'll probably be sharing screen. So if I could just hand over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Yes, if I just, I've got a few slides that to just try and walk us through the paper, if that's okay, and I'll try and present those now. Hopefully that will work out okay. Bear with me a second. It always takes longer than you think to do this. Apologies. Sorry, my computer's running backwards at the moment, so there we go. I'm afraid I can't entertain and do this at the same time, so let me just... Okay, hopefully, can you see the slides there now, Chair?
They're on the way. Excellent. Thank you. Well done.
Okay, great. Apologies. When I seem to project it, it does seem to go a little bit awry. So let me just, if I can just enlarge it like that, hopefully that's visible enough for people in the room. So, so you asked for an update on the Mayor's Climate Emergency Action Plan, which was produced back in July last year. And so I'm just going to take you through some of the key areas of activity that have been happening in that period. I'm going to really talk about the kind of governance arrangements have been put in place, the development of the One City climate strategy, which has been a key part of that. Some of the work that's ongoing around communication and engagement, but also the work we're doing to make the City Council a carbon neutral council and to lead by example, and some work around climate change training, and also touch on the sort of COVID response and the alignment between the work we're doing on climate change and the broader economic recovery aspects of COVID-19. So around the governance, and I know many of the members of the Commission will already be aware of this, it's very clear that the City Council can't make Bristol a carbon neutral or indeed climate resilient city over any timescale if it acts alone. And therefore what it needed to do was bring together many agencies within the city, but also beyond, and draw on the One City approach very much to address the City Council, the city's climate change challenges. So the One City Board has taken on the leadership for that climate change strategy and the climate change agenda more generally, and which is complemented by the Bristol Advisory Committee on Climate Change. And what that tries to do is provide us with independent advice. And this was built on this emergency planning model where you have, if you like, your kind of command structure, but you have separate to that your independent scientific advisory group. And many of us, of course, have become more familiar with this in recent years, with sort of recent months, with the scientific advice to government and SAGE and the like. And so the idea is that committee can tell us what they think needs to happen and provide a view on the work of the City Council and the wider city response to climate change. And they'll be producing an annual report of progress from their perspective that's independent of all of those offices. And that's due out in sort of November time this year. The key piece of work that the Environment Board led and the City Council with the mayors provided some additional resources in September budget, some supplementary funding. What that did was able to develop the climate change strategy. And we've developed the most comprehensive evidence base and strategy that the city's ever had around climate change. And certainly our evidence base addresses all scopes of emissions, so our direct emissions, our indirect emissions, but also importantly addresses climate resilience and provides an assessment of the vulnerability of the city to climate change impacts and how we might start to address those. And that strategy was adopted by the board in February and then endorsed by the mayor at the March cabinet. Obviously then we had some plans, carefully worked out plans around wider engagement and mobilisation of the response to the partners around the One City climate strategy. Of course, COVID-19 meant that many of the organisations that we needed to work with focus had to be shifted to response, or indeed more fundamental issues as they respond to COVID. And so as that response phase is now tailed off and we're more into the recovery phase, we've been reopening many of those conversations. And indeed, some of them have been continuing throughout the main response phase of COVID-19. Around communications, again, the strategy that we adopted was to provide, try and use council resources to multiply and have a much bigger effect. And so the mayor committed to working with some communities particularly and help them develop kind of bottom-up community action plans. And through a partnership with a number of communities, 6 communities around the city, and the Bristol Green Capital Partnership and a few others, including the universities, we've been able to be successful in securing Big Lottery's Community Action Fund funding for a project with, say, 6 groups within the city. And hopefully that will then go on to be able to attract further funding. And that funding was an incredibly competitive process. There were 600 applications to the first round of that, and 19 were funded. So that's just a little under 3% were funded. So the Bristol Consortium has done extremely well, and I think the council's support for that and the mayor's support for that has been, I think, very helpful in helping them be in that top group. We're also then looking to, if that's the sort of deep engagement with a number of communities, we're also working to support the more general public, more general needs of the citizens around accurate information about what they can do around climate change. And the Bristol Climate Hub will be launched shortly as a web platform. That will be the first iteration of that will start that, and we'll build on that as over time. And then we're developing a 3-year comms and engagement plan, which will allow us, as part of this wider climate change programme that's being considered by Cabinet in November this year, and that will set out the aspirations around the climate change communications and engagement, but also what the City Council's contribution to that will be, because obviously it won't be just down to the City Council to do that communication engagement. But the City Council does have an important role to lead by example where it can. And so the Mayor set out an ambition, a goal, no, not an ambition, a target to be, the City Council to be carbon neutral for our, what we call scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. That's our direct emissions. That's things like electricity, gas, our fleet vehicles, where we have a certain amount more control over them, that we will be carbon neutral by 2025. And we're working on that, on quantifying those in great detail, but also being able to plan how we reduce those. And we've made great progress over the recent years, and we reduced them already by 80%. And so we're now into the really difficult bit. And as anyone will know, that for diminishing returns, the last 20% is the hardest 20%. And that's the bit we're into now. We've also then been seeking to understand our scope 3 emissions. So there's indirect emissions from what we buy, the goods and services that we buy, the things that we might build around the city infrastructure or whatever. And there we're trying to get through the kind of, it's not very exciting stuff, but it's quite important about getting into the processes and decision-making of projects and procurement and others to enable people to get better carbon and climate change outcomes at the end of their projects. And it is very much, it's not a quick fix, but we're working with colleagues to kind of enable that process to be more effective as we go forward. And part of that, helping colleagues to change the kind of turn the direction of travel for some of those programs, is that they've got the competencies to be able to do so. And also the confidence of that they're making choices and they're dealing with new things, and they're able to challenge their design teams to really push the boundaries on things. And so we're looking at some training for council staff more broadly, and then more specific professional development for this more specialist roles. And we had piloted that, some face-to-face training with a couple of groups of willing volunteers just prior to lockdown, and obviously that's had to be shelved, and we're now going online with that, and we'll have 3 packages of training around awareness, about approaches and solutions, and some climate leadership roles. And the intention is that we'll offer that to all staff and council managers and leaders, but also to all the politicians. So you can look forward to that offer fairly soon. I'm sure many members of this Scrutiny Commission won't benefit from this training because they already know a great deal about it, but it's trying to provide that kind of foundation knowledge for the whole of the organisation. And then just finally, just to touch on COVID-19 and the very clear, if you read the Economic Recovery Statement of Intent, the very clear statement there to align the work we're doing around climate change and recovery to each other, so that the things that we can do to, for example, around green home grants or retrofitting, both delivers 2 sets of outcomes. It's economic recovery and a better set of climate outcomes. And finally, just touch on the Mayor has invested a number of resources in increasing our capacity around climate change action. And the first one I mentioned earlier was in September last financial year, committed resources, which has allowed us to develop the climate strategy and also some of the things I've talked about so far. And this year we've got some additional revenue budget that will go up again according to the budget that you passed in February, up again in April, and also the allocation of some reserve funding, which will allow us to make more specific climate change projects. And that's allowed us to create a new climate change team. And we've appointed a new team manager for that, working as part of my service. And we'll be hopefully recruiting further posts to that and more specialist roles to that team as we go through the next coming months, subject to the Cabinet approval of the wider climate change programme. So thank you very much. I hope that's helpful, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Okay, so Martin was very prompt there, getting his hand up. Thank you very much for that. You know, it really just seems that there's a lot going on there. So you've got Martin and then Mark Bradshaw.
Right. Thank you, Alex. It's really helpful as always, and very, very informative. Brought a lot of things together. I'm particularly impressed from the briefings and things I've been to with the evidence base that's been gathered for the city. You know, we've got a much better understanding of just what the issues are and how ambitious we have to be. And I'm glad that there's this complementary approach to education and training, and actually having a team who can then lead on things, because I think you need both. We can't leave it to everyone else, but we do need them to understand. So this is really helpful to have both of those planks to it. My concern is what the strategy actually is, or rather what the actions will actually be. When we got the first document in July last year, it was really a summary of where we'd got to up till now, what had already been done, what was already planned. It wasn't new actions. And then now there's the One City climate strategy, which is helpful. I'm afraid you didn't have a link to it in this, which might have been useful to make people readily go and check it. But I have checked it and I've read it before. And it has a lot of things in it, and they're all lots of very good sounding proposals, but none of them are commitments. And it doesn't say who's leading on any of them. It just says there's lots of things, we'd like things to happen this year and the year after and the year after, and we need all those things to happen. It doesn't say how they'll happen, who'll lead on them, and whether there are still the commitments to them, because as you said, some people have kind of got a bit worried and distracted, rightly, by all of the disruption caused by COVID. So there is this risk register item that we saw earlier that implies this is kind of in hand. And I'm worried if actually the risk is rising on this, that it won't be implemented, won't be delivered. So I'm concerned about possible disconnect between the fine words in the economic statement of intent. Is that the right way to describe it? You refer
Can I just interrupt there for a minute, Martin, and say, are you asking for firmer assurances of things actually happening, some concrete measurements?
Yes,
when can we have that? Is that what you're asking?
Right. That's right. And in particular, the fact there is a statement of intent that it's going to be a sustainable recovery, but how will we know, and how will the two different strategies be brought together? And to me, that's the most important thing. They actually do come together and then lead to real action. I know that's a big ask, but
it is a big ask. It's a very long question. Alex, what can you do with that?
Yeah, let me see how I can help with that. So yeah, I think Councillor Fodor there identified that the Mayor's initial action plan was very much, I describe it, sort of enabling works. It was about how do we start to respond to the emergency, what's our initial response to it. And then the strategy sets out very much the long-term, or the sort of 10-year plan of what we know needs to happen in the city. And we took the environment board took a very deliberate decision. Essentially, we have two choices. They have two choices. One is you do a plan that sets out the things you can do and builds from where you are and builds up in steps from where you are. The other is to say, where do we need to be? And let's try and work backwards about. And we very much took the latter, which is, this is the challenge that we've got and what we know needs to happen. And we'll try and work backwards to enable that to happen. So what we envisage under the strategy, because it was developed in very quick order, really, was a number of more specific delivery plans that allow us to say, okay, these are the common this is the shared purpose around housing, around housing, around transport, around how we're going to decarbonise heat, and then to be able to develop much more specific plans. So, for example, on heat, we're working with Department for Business, Energy, Industrial Strategy to develop a heat decarbonisation plan for the city with a set of specific projects that some of which will be extensions of what we're already doing, but some of which we know will need to be entirely new things. So we're trying to bridge that gap now between the strategic priorities that have been agreed in the strategy and practical delivery of specific interventions. And the climate programme that's being considered by Cabinet is another part of that bridging process of going from the big picture down into and here's a project with some concrete.
So can I just further ask a supplementary on that? So when you talked about us getting to carbon neutrality by 2025, we know in scope 1 and 2, did you say, you said something about, the last 20% is the hardest bit. And I was sort of deducing from that you're saying that we're 80% there and we've got 4 years to get to 100%. Is that correct?
That's for the city council's operational emissions. So
yeah, I understand that.
Council buildings, council vans.
So are you sort of saying we're 80% there to being carbon neutral and that we just need to push to get the last 20%?
For the city council's direct emissions.
City council by 2025.
Yeah, but not for but that doesn't include our procured goods and services or our capital program or other things.
Electricity and the fleet and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, but then that wouldn't really meet the target. So you'd have to have things that wouldn't be things that we procure. That's not part of the target then, is it?
Yes, it is part of the target.
Okay.
Everything, so the target that you voted for in council in November 18 included the scope, everything that any person or business in the city buys or consumes from anywhere in the world. That's what scope 3 emissions means.
I know that's scope 3. I think what I'm just trying to clarify is, I think just to sort of finish off Martin's point, which is that I suppose we're looking for, how close to achieving these targets are we? How can we firm up the percent? I mean, I remember when the first document came to the first scrutiny, we were, even though all the proposals that were there, I remember you saying we were still 64% shy of getting to carbon neutrality by 2030. So I think people are still looking for some sort of assurances on actual, percentage progress towards it, or at what point would we be able to say we are going to meet these targets, we aren't going to meet these targets.
And can I just add to that? My point would be, is there a dashboard for all of this? And is someone or who is looking at it? Because as we know, it's a collaborative thing. And there are all these aspirations, all these fine words, all these lists of things that someone will have to do with someone. But is there some owner of the dashboard for it?
Yeah. So we are working on a dashboard at the moment, actually. I suppose we just have to step back a little bit. So the government's current target is that national legislative target is that the UK is carbon neutral in 30 years' time for half of its emissions. Broadly speaking, the territorial emissions, which we might say are a bit like scope 1 and scope 2. It's not the same, but let me just, for the purpose of this illustration. So what the motion that council passed was to do what the national government has said that they want to happen nationally, to do it 3 times as fast and 2 or 3 times as much. So the job is 6 to 9 times bigger than the national statutory target. And we, of course, have the levers that are available to a municipality and to the local actors in the city that we can, businesses and citizens that we can mobilise, which are not necessarily the full suite of measures that are available to a national government that has treasury and has lawmaking powers. And so the scale of the challenge that you've set and where we were at, it's not a simple matter of drawing a line between those two. It's about how quickly can we mobilise people to rapidly accelerate what's happening, and that's, I suppose, has been our focus, is drawing together the full range of organisations in the city, identifying that common challenge and purpose, and then starting to mobilise them through the delivery plans into very specific, nailable sort of interventions that allow us to say, well, if we're going to have zero carbon heat, we need to have no gas boilers. So how's the city going on removing gas boilers from, and when I say the city, I mean the totality of Bristol, not the city council. How's the city going on removing those gas boilers? And so how many air source heat pumps have we installed collectively? How many grant source. You know, there's a whole, and we can start to sort of dashboard those measures. But that is just understanding that is a big thing in itself. And that then lays us quite nicely into the piece that you also asked about, the alignment with the recovery. So the government has announced funding for green retrofits of public buildings, and there's £1 billion of investment there, and also 2 billion for domestic retrofitting, green home grants of varying sorts, and the Conservative Party's manifesto made projections around £9 billion for those sorts of measures, and so we anticipate we may see further announcements in the autumn statement. But so what we're trying to do is make sure that Bristol is well placed to be able to, Bristol homeowners or landlords or social landlords are well placed to be able to access those grants, but also the Bristol supply chain is able to provide those services. And at the moment that is quite problematic because of the certification requirements the government has very sensibly in some ways put in place, but many of the small businesses in the city just aren't in a position to be able to directly supply into those supply chains. So we're trying to work through some of that process and hoping to be able to do that sort of knitting that allows homeowners in Bristol to be able to access those grants and to be able to employ local builders and support that local supply chain. And thank you, Councillor Smith. He's just popped, I see he popped into the chat, a note about the scale of the challenge. And we estimated that to decarbonise the city from Scope 1 and 2 emissions would be the order of 10 billion, and he's put up 4 billion for housing stuff. So that starts to give you some. So broadly speaking, we could spend all the current round of government funding. We could spend that in Bristol and still not complete the job, and even though we're only 0.7% of the population.
Thank you, Alex. I do think. I mean, I think it really is important. I mean, I love all of the stuff that you've done about training staff, and that is really essential to change people's attitudes and to make people really aware. But equally, I think we need to, not be complacent about the fact that because we've got a strategy that's aiming to get us to carbon neutral by 2030. I don't want citizens to start thinking that we are going to be carbon neutral by 2030 just by having a strategy. It's a huge challenge.
Yes.
Yes. Mark Bradshaw and then Mark Weston.
Thanks, Chair. I listened carefully to the presentation, which was helpful.
Uh-oh. I think it's just Mark that's frozen. I seem to be still moving.
Between the two. And I wanted to ask Alex, which elected members are on either of those two groupings?
I'm sorry, Councillor Bradshaw, you dipped out, so I'm not sure which two groupings you're referring to.
The One City Environment Board and the Bristol Advisory Climate Change Committee.
Right. So the One City Environment Board is co-chaired by the Mayor, along with another person from Anne Cousins, and the Advisory Committee has no politicians on it, and that is it because it's a group of technical academics, scientists, engineers, communications experts, psychologists who have got this range of technical skills and have no political dimension. So the Mayor is on the board. Obviously, all the boards were involved. The One City boards were involved in the development of the strategy to greater or lesser extents. And so, for example, Councillor Smith chairs, Councillor Smith was formerly co-chair of the Homes and Communities Board, and so on.
I chair nothing.
You will be
very wise.
Aware of the cabinet members' links to the various One City committees, One City boards.
Okay.
But just to confirm that there are no councillors on either of these two groupings. That's really what I wanted to know, and it sounds like there aren't any on them.
Yeah.
So thank you, Alex.
At the One City boards, the executive is represented, and on each of the boards, and the advisory committee is very intentionally a bit like Sage, kept without physical.
Hopefully not as leaky as Sage.
Thank you. So Mark Weston.
Thank you, Chair. Mine was on the slide, climate change training. I realise, I think I know where you're going with it, but what is the purpose of it? And the reason I say that is we attend an awful lot of briefings. We get sort of, not this one, I'm happy to say, we get told the same kind of things about what the problem is. Does the briefing come up with solutions and things we should be doing? Or is it for us to attend a meeting and be told how horrible it all is again? I just want to know what the value of doing it is, and actually whether the outreach should be more with community groups, or is our purpose to act as the bridge to those groups? I just want to know a bit more about that.
Thank you. So the training particularly referred to on the slide there is particularly aimed at council colleagues and council staff at all levels in the organisation, and it, if you like, builds up three layers of that. So it's firstly awareness and knowledge of the issues, and so some colleagues don't have your level of understanding of the problem. Then also, what the next layer is, what the solutions and approaches might be, and in some ways, depending on people's roles, we can't necessarily give them a solution, but we give them the ways in which they can think about problems, so they can, it's very much about teaching them to fish rather than just handing them fish. And then
understood.
For those who want to be able to be more, have more of a leadership role in the organisation, or feel they have that within projects or within teams, to be able to fulfil that role, either as just a champion in the office or as a kind of senior manager in the organisation. I think when it comes to the member training, which I think is perhaps where you were focused on, that's something that we need to make much more bespoke, and I would really like to have a discussion with members before we, rather than just saying, here's the training, actually have a discussion about what you would find helpful across the cohort of members. Obviously, GNR members might be of a slightly different level of awareness of some of these issues than perhaps colleagues in other members on other commissions whose interests lie in other parts of the world. So yeah, we're very keen to design something that's going to be useful for you, because the last thing I want to do is waste any of your time, but also not enable you to be able to respond to deliver on the motion, because you made that commitment. That's what we want, and I know many members here personally want that to help, so want to deliver that. So it's about what tools do you need, and that we might be able to equip you with, that would be useful for you.
I think, to be honest, from my point of view, I'd quite like then to see what the briefing is. And it might be that we say, well, actually, we need this or that or else. I guess I'll wait for the.
I think we can't underestimate the value of giving that training to colleagues in offices in the council, because if you have that in the front of their mind, I mean, I think that's how you have systemic change, is because you show the importance for it. We've got a question from Tim. I'm conscious we're running over a little bit, but this is a very important item. So I'll just have one last question from Tim. Can you make it quite succinct, please, Tim?
Yeah, thanks, I will. I'm just going to show my complete naivety here of council operations. You've got 3 million, it says, that's allocated from reserves for projects. Presumably those are projects which aren't yet happening. Is it possible that that gets taken away from you again, given the huge deficits that we're going to have because of COVID-19?
So the cabinet will be coming to it. So I'm reporting on what the budget that was passed in February was. Clearly, there are pressures on all the council finances, and cabinet will be coming to a view about what the programme that they think is affordable within the current financial constraints at their November meeting. So that's very much council action on climate change isn't immune from the broader.
Yeah, it's 3 million now, but it might not be in November.
It was 3 million in February.
But it was 3 million in February. Was there not a demand on that money between February and now, just to spend it? I mean, I sort of think if I was given £3 million because there's a climate emergency, I'd find some way to spend it. Am I just too flahuluk with my money?
I think what has been key is that we're doing there's two aspects. One is build the core capacity of the team, and then ensure that we we have the right kind of programme that will respond to the pressing needs. So that's what we've been working on in recent months, so that there can be a measured consideration of it rather than just a start. I'm sure our Section 151 officer is giving all those projects, will give up any spend from that a great deal of scrutiny. So we need to be able to ensure that we've got the right business case behind those changes.
Okay, I think I'm really sorry. We have run out of time, Alex. Every time you come to these meetings, people are always really engaged and interested, and I have been really impressed by I sometimes get a bit frustrated because it seems slow, but the progress, it's very, it's clear that really solid foundations are being built for a systemic change. And hopefully, when this dovetails with the economic recovery, and we can all really have this whole Build Back Better, let's get the Green New Deal going to bring back all the jobs, and we'll all be going in the same direction in a very positive way. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we're now on to the housing item, which I think is Zoe.
I'm going to hand over to, or introduce you to Elaine Oliphant, who is the head of housing delivery, to introduce this item and bring in her colleague.
Hi everyone, I'll do a bit of an intro to the next item, which is the housing delivery update. So Tim Ward, Enabling and Strategy Manager, will deliver the update this evening. Tim and I have both recently been recruited to the enlarged housing delivery team, which has been set up to address issues regarding delivery of affordable housing. So on that note, I'll hand over to Tim, who can take you through the update.
Thank you, Elaine. Can everyone see my screen and see the slides? Okay, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. As Elaine mentioned, the purpose here is to provide a brief overview of our forecasts for affordable housing delivery over the next 3 years and give some commentary and analysis in support of those forecasts, and then give a briefing of how the housing delivery team's work program is geared to accelerate delivery of housing over the next 3 years. So this, as a first section, I'll focus on original kind of assumed forecast for affordable housing delivery, talk a little bit about the precise challenges that COVID-19 has posed on delivery, and then provide some forecasts for the next 3 financial years as well. So just very briefly, in 2017, we had made some assumptions around how the MES target for affordable housing would be met. As the slide shows, that we anticipated that around 48% would come through registered providers, and the remaining 52% would come from other interventions. We also explored, or had assumed, that a number of tools would be used in the delivery of affordable housing, and those are outlined at the bottom of the slide. Some of those are a mixture of delivering through entities, for example, the Housing Revenue Account, or HRA, and Gorham Homes, and some of them are underpinning mechanisms that enable and accelerate delivery. So Section 106 negotiations, grant funding, and land release, by example. At the kind of midway through the year and at the outset, or after a few months of the impact of COVID-19, we did some engagement with registered providers and housing associations, just to understand about what the impact of COVID-19 would be, based on the best available knowledge that we had. And what we heard at that point in time when we spoke to registered providers was that they were forecasting an estimated 6-month lag in their delivery due to temporary site closures and capacity issues, and generally taking a more risk-averse approach to their development programs as a result of some of those issues. We also saw contractors operating at between 50 and 90% capacity, depending on the stage of development and what the rules were allowing them to do. We also saw build prices increasing as a result of the slowdown and the extra additional kind of requirements that COVID-19 placed on it. We also, so while there is uncertainty about the longer term impacts, what we see at the moment is a fairly hot housing market because of some of the impact of the measures that have been put in place, particularly around stamp duty, for example. And at the moment, it seems like shared ownership and open market sales rates are holding up and are close to pre-lockdown levels. However, once the furlough scheme ends and once some of the measures that were taken to support the housing market end, there's a risk that we'll see unemployment increasing and we'll see the housing market slow down. And that will then have a knock-on impact on affordable housing products like shared ownership, possibly being the most adversely affected. So in terms of the target for affordable housing and based on some of these factors, on July, a revised target of 500 affordable homes was agreed within that context. And based on the most up-to-date returns from the data that we collect from registered providers and others, we're in the position to forecast 489 affordable homes will be completed in 2020 and 2021. And that breaks down to 380 that are forecasted to be delivered through registered providers and 109 through the HRA and other routes. And then just breaking down or looking ahead a little bit further, this slide shows our current forecast for affordable housing completions over the next 3 financial years. The solid blue line shows the historical actual affordable housing completions dating back to 2015 and 16. The dotted blue line is a best case forecast of completions based on the most recent data returns from RPs and other sources. The solid green line takes that best case estimate and applies a discount to it based on what it looks like historically if you compare the target to the actual performance. And so that can tend to be 80% of the target, is the actual figure is 80% of the target for that year. And so the green line shows what would happen if that continued for the next 3 years. And what it shows is missing the target this year, but then hitting the target and exceeding the target for the next year. And then finally, the red line is a scenario based on what would happen. It's a simple trend line, and it's a simple escalation of 15%, of an increase of 15% per year. But it's not based on the intelligence and the data that we have. So just moving on, in order to meet the housing targets that we are established, we've got a significant work program in the housing delivery team to increase and accelerate delivery. And I'll just talk through in brief some of the actions that are planned in order to meet the target. So on this slide, firstly, Section 106 and enabling, that function's in the process of being staffed up and focused on securing as much Section 106 housing as possible. We're looking for opportunities to increase affordable housing supply where we can, and doing everything we can to support and build the capacity of registered providers in Bristol. And that also includes resources that we have in place to unblock any internal barriers to affordable housing development. So working with our colleagues when we see blockages or slippages in the system and doing our best to unblock those. We also have a grant funding program that's offered by the council. We're making every effort to make sure that funding is utilised and it's aimed and targeted at registered providers and their development programmes. We're also working closely with Homes England to make sure that our grant programmes align and complement each other, particularly in light of the announcement recently about the new affordable housing grant funding programme for 2021 to 2026. And so then on land release, we're working hard to get land release and out for development. That includes working on 17 sites where we've either agreed terms with the developer or in contract and delivery with the developer. And at the same time, we're also releasing sites for community-led housing, and we've just closed the first bidding round for 11 sites for community-led housing as well. And then on the major project side, there's 3 major projects that are referenced in the report, and we're making progress to deliver those new homes, the 2,900 that would be delivered through Hengrove Park, Lockleys and Southmead. On the housing revenue account programme, there's an ambitious programme in place there, working hard to increase our capacity in the direct HRA development team so that we can increase our delivery of council housing. And overall, there's a forward programme of just under 1,200 homes. And then the report also talks about the forecast for the direct delivery of council housing over the next few years. And then on the Bristol Housing Festival and modern methods of construction, that is underway, and we're making progress to pursue those different methods of construction. We're testing different methodologies and finding ways to speed up delivery. Interestingly, in the new affordable housing grant funding program, one of the priorities for government is the utilisation of modern methods of construction. And so, you know, we're ahead there, and we're kind of leading the way in terms of the work that we're doing there. And then finally, on Gorham Homes, as per the report, we've released the 2 sites to Gorham, and we're working as well with Gorham Homes to support and accelerate their delivery on the sites, as well as exploring how we can further support them in the future. And so that concludes the presentation. I would be happy to take any questions arising.
Thank you, Tim. Yes, nice and succinct and lots of detail. So that's great. Do we have any questions? Oh gosh, they're all piling in now. So Martin Fodor, Mark Weston and Tim Rippington in that order, please. And if I could ask you, just remind you to be succinct with your questions, please.
Great. Yeah, thanks very much. That was really helpful. And it is impressive. There is a lot going on. I return to the issue of optimism bias that comes up in the report, and what's forecast, whereas what's actually delivered or likely to be delivered. And this came up like last year, at least, if not before, that there were tables showing all these houses were going to be built. And I remember saying they're all forecast. They shouldn't be in the table unless they're in, like italics or something, because they're not actually built until they're completed. We can't count them. So how, even now, the actual likely forecast is 391, am I right, on page 67? After the weighting is applied, which is the actual historical likely outcome.
Tim, are you going to answer that?
Yeah. So just to, that's the if we, as you say, they are forecasts and they're based on the most up-to-date intelligence that we have. We are about to do a Q2 data return. And so as we go through the year, we will get firmer and firmer in on our understanding, and we'll get more confidence in the forecasts that are coming forward. The 80% kind of difference is not a perfect way of understanding what may actually, or what is more likely to happen. And I would say one of the other things that we're doing is really improving our data management and analytics, so that we can be more precise and more careful around the forecasts that we're providing, and provide more analysis and commentary around it. The 80% is our best understanding based on the historical data that we have available.
So I did actually ask earlier today for some information on historic delivery to be put into the presentation. I'm not sure whether you've got that information, but it would be very interesting to see. I think it would be really useful for members to have sort of what the projections were in 2017 or whatever, and then what the actuality was. So that we could measure going forward. So I think that's the answer to the optimism bias problem. Do you have that information? Cool.
I can share that now. Yeah, so apologies for not adding it to the presentation, but this is, so I have 2 slides I can show. This is the historical information that we have dating back to 2008, 2009. This is the kind of the performance regime that we have, and the column here shows what we set as the target, and then this is the column that shows the actual. I think the commentary that I would add around this, and it might be more helpful to see it as a graph, which I also have, and I can show. I think what it reflects is 2 things. The first is just the typical development cycle, or the cyclical nature of development, and also the impact of the economy on the development process as well, because you can see that in terms of the red line and the actual number. The other kind of commentary I would add is affordable housing is delivered or is more easily delivered in volume when you have significant grant funding available. And so I think what you can see is the impact probably of reductions in affordable housing and then bouncing or kind of slowly rebounding as more funding is made available for that affordable housing.
Okay, and do you have the same data for all over housing delivery as well as affordable housing? Or maybe you could let us have that at another time. I think I might not have made that clear.
Yeah, I only have the data, apologies, for affordable housing, but
okay,
we can forward that to you after the meeting.
Yeah, that'll be fine. Thanks very much, Elaine. Okay, I've got questions. So we've got Mark Weston and then Tim.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on a similar vein, actually, and it's this, I'm sceptical about the optimism. I think there are some really good measures about how you can improve the delivery, and I don't want to detract from them. But the problem is we've sort of been looking at this before, and I know the target is 800, and it was 800 this year. The graphs you've shown, that was never possible and was never remotely ever going to be achievable. So it does make me start to question whether any of the graphs you've shown, whether they're discounted or worst case, best case, are going to happen. And just as a case in point, the one you've got up at the moment, last year, between the target and the actual, the target is actually about 30 to 40% above the actual. So the green line on slide, oh, I forget which slide number it is, but you know, where we saw the green line earlier, slide 6, only had a discount of 20%. So even that seems optimistic to me. And so I'm nervous that I'm getting told the same thing, that really everything's fine and it's all in hand, but actually it's not. And I'm nervous about this, Chair. Less of a question, more of a statement.
Well, it is a statement, isn't it? There's no question there, really.
Nope.
Tim?
Yeah, my question is just about the sites where these affordable homes are planned to be built. I was wondering if we know what percentage is brownfield sites.
We don't currently have that data with us tonight, but I'm sure we could furnish you with that information.
Yes, please, if you could. Thank you.
Okay. Could I just ask a little bit about Gorham Homes? Obviously, you know, the two projects that are there, you know, look really promising. And I was just wondering, I'm not sure if you can really answer this question, but how quickly can it be scaled up? Because there are so many benefits to building through them.
We are currently working really hard with Gorham Homes. I have 2 meetings a month in my diary with them for extended slots so that we can help them unlock any problems they're finding. I know that at the minute they're just about to put in reserve matters for Romney House, and they're working hard on Baltic Wharf, and that's in planning at the minute, and there are meetings going on to try and unlock some sort of, you know, issues around that. So we are working really hard with them. We acknowledge that it's a really good delivery route, and going forward, we're expecting to work with them more than potentially we have in the past.
But are you, for example, identifying any other sites or?
Yes, we are. We're always looking at the sites, and we put them through the site analysis tool that we have, and we take that to Housing Delivery Board, and there are a number of sites that will go through to Gorham Homes in the future. And what we're trying to do at the moment is we're trying to de-risk them for them, de-risk the sites for Gorham Homes, so that when they get them, it's much easier of a process.
Okay, thank you. I certainly don't mean to seem as if we're saying that you know, you're just foolishly optimistic and you're, you know, nothing's going to happen. I'm sure it's quite obvious that people are doing a lot of work, and some of the new bills have been fantastic. So well done for all of that. I think we're more or less. I don't think we have any more questions on this item now. So because it's quite late already, I think I'm going to cut you short there and move on to the white paper. I think Zoe wanted to give us an overview of what is in store for us, or possibly not in store for us, or whatever's going to happen. Are you there, Zoe?
I am here, yes, and I'm thinking Sarah's just joined us as well. So I think because of time, I'm not going to spend, I think if Sarah rattles through and says what it covers, then in terms of any discussion, I'm happy to pick up points.
I think, yes, I think it's obvious that, you know, we've done 2.5 hours on Zoom already. People get a bit jaded, and the white paper and the details of that is not really going to keep us away from our dinner table or our television sets or whatever we want to do.
So if I can just share my screen, if that's okay.
Hello, Sarah.
Hi there. So just sharing my screen. Tell me when you see it.
Not yet.
No, it's coming.
I wasn't rushing you. I was just
No,
saying.
it's okay. How's it doing now? Are you seeing it?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, good. Right. So I've just go through this for you. So we've
Sarah,
got.
could you do
you want
full screen, because it's very small on the Zoom. So if you go view full screen or display.
Top right hand.
Yeah, it's okay. Let me go for a complete one.
Okay.
How's that? Is that looking better?
Okay.
Good. Right. So we've got two government consultations coming out, which both came out on the 6th of August. They are both significant. There's the one with the shorter deadline is changes to the current planning system, which could happen pretty rapidly. So there's some potential for the changes which are proposed within that consultation to be put in place by early November. But the deadline for the comments on that one are the 1st of October. The other consultation document is the white paper, and that has a longer consultation period. And then the aspirations from government for that paper are that it is put in place swiftly enough to allow a new local planning system to give us new local plans by the end of the current Parliament, which is May 2024, I believe, currently. So that's the context of the two consultation documents in general. On the overview for the planning for the future white paper, which is the bigger of the two documents, the white paper proposes really quite substantial reforms to the planning system, which affect local plans, the approach to how we deal with planning applications, how we deal with development contributions, how we get development contributions through the process, and how we deal with design processes as well. And it will give us a very different looking local plan. So there are three sections to the white paper. There's a section on planning for development, a section on planning for beautiful and sustainable places, which is an interesting terminology, and planning for infrastructure and connected places. So what I'm really going to focus on quite swiftly is just giving you what the headlines are, because there is an enormous amount of detail in the white paper. What's also clear is that there are an enormous amount of gaps in the content of the white paper, and we'd anticipate quite a lot of detail needed to make some of the gaps and the aspirations of the white paper stitch up. So the starting point for the whole process really is that the local plan system takes too long to deliver, and I think we'd probably all support that aspiration. It's very frustrating that producing a local plan takes as long as it does. So the aspiration is that the local plan system is simplified and standardized to focus effectively on three categories of land area: a growth area, a renewal area, and protected areas. Now this of itself is obviously quite challenging, and before you get very much further, you find yourself trying to work out how that would come into play for Bristol at all, because obviously we have so much complexity within our city. But we would anticipate that the growth areas would be those areas where there would be significant new development. In most local authorities, that might well be on the edge of a city area. It might be new town type development. So for Bristol, that's going to be quite challenging, given that we are backed up all the way around by Greenbelt. But we'd also expect to see that some of those major regeneration areas that we've already identified would be picked up by that kind of a designation. So the local plans need to allocate enough land for development in the right places, give certainty about what can be developed, and make the process for getting planning permission as simple as possible. And quite challengingly, in that process, give communities a real opportunity to shape those decisions. So as we take the growth, renewal and protected areas forward, there will be different types of planning permission and assumptions around planning permission for those areas. So for a growth area, there will be an assumption that the identification of sites within that area would give an outline approval automatically for the type of development specified in the plan. So we have to be very careful in thinking about how we would take this forward. Renewal areas would also have a presumption in favour of development that's identified in those areas, and the protected areas, we're assuming that you would need to very carefully justify any additional change in those areas. One of the real challenges for this process is that there is an assumption that the plan that we produce will be very much a map plan, and that the detail of the planning policy would be taken out of our local plan and taken back up into the National Planning Policy Framework, so that we don't write our own planning policies. We write our maps elements of the plans, but we don't write detailed planning policies. Any detail that would come through planning policies would actually be done mostly through design coding. So a very different type of approach to plan preparation from the one we've had. The process for preparing a plan will be no more than 30 months rather than the sort of 5 years that it can take to 5 to 6 years it can take to get a plan through the process currently. And the balance of that will be an initial 6 months to identify the areas where we will be putting our sites, and then a year and then another 9 months or so for the planning inspectorate to consider the planning process. So the balance is somewhat shifted from the work that we would do as a local plan to identify areas and to identify the content, with quite a weight for the planning inspectorate to give consideration to the process. As we talked about before, the duty to cooperate would be removed. We've picked that point out earlier. I don't think that would remove our need to be able to demonstrate that we work together in a cross-boundary and produce appropriate cross-boundary infrastructure aspirations in our planning. So I don't think any particular change really in that. The planning applications and decisions processes, the aspiration in that producing areas, mapped areas for our plans would be that the assumption given to development would mean that you wouldn't need outline planning applications in growth areas. So there would be no outline planning applications. The assumption would be there that development would be permitted, and it would only be the detail that would be sorted out in growth areas, not the principle. The principle would be set. So the whole process would be shorter and more concise, and the detail required to justify planning applications would be less. There is an assumption that fees will be set nationally, but would cover at least the full cost of processing applications. So it wouldn't give us that aspiration that we'd be able to set the fees necessary to cover our own costs, but it would come from the centre. On public consultation, the consultation process on planning applications would be streamlined. And again, that emphasis on making decisions that we picked up earlier on would be the decisions would be largely made at the plan making stage. So that rather assumes a greater involvement and engagement of councillors in the plan making process and in communities in that process. And then it assumes a lesser opportunity to object to the principles of development when the detailed proposals comes forward. On fast tracking for beauty, because we would be expected to give high quality development proposals which met national standards and our local standards, a quick journey through, then the assumption be that there would be an aspiration on the part of developer to meet those high quality standards and to meet the locally prepared design codes in order to get faster planning permissions. That of course will be a challenge in terms of being sure that those aspirations have been met by the detailed planning proposals. And the emphasis on quality and design picked up by the expectation that each local planning authority would have a chief officer of design and placemaking. We touched a little also on community infrastructure. So the community infrastructure levy that we currently have will be replaced by a new infrastructure levy, which will be set nationally. So we set our own local levels of community infrastructure in terms of the costs that get applied to individual applications through a standard approach. That would now be taken up to a nationally set level so that every form of development would have a flat rate charge, and that wouldn't reflect the local costs. Large building sites would be split between developers to accelerate delivery. And what that means, or the aspiration for that, is that rather than holding sites, developers would need to share sites with smaller building companies. The aspiration there being that we'd have a faster delivery because a larger number of smaller developers would be able to gain access to site. I think that of itself is quite a challenge, and the smaller site would be perceived to be below 50. That doesn't, I think, preclude the major developers for getting involved. Quite a lot of the major developers do pick up sites of below 50, so it doesn't necessarily enable the small local developer to get in there. The housing delivery test that we're all currently subject to, which makes sure that we have a 5-year supply, would be maintained. And the cost of operating the planning system will be funded by developer contributions. So moving on again. The secondary consultation, which is the consultation which could impact more immediately, focuses particularly on changes to the calculation of the housing number. So the standard method for calculating housing numbers would be changed, and that change could come in very quickly. So we've put up here the numbers that relate to Bristol. So when we were working through the numbers we expected to see for Bristol, the 10-year equivalent of the figure we were working to under the Joint Spatial Plan was that we would have over 10 years, we were looking to deliver 16,750 new homes. That's net additional new homes. The number we're currently working with, so that's a new standard method that's come in since we began the preparation of the Joint Spatial Plan. The demand on us would be 23,680. In the future, if the proposals come forward as they're currently structured in the guidance, then that revised standard method would require of us 24,900 new homes in 10 years. So that itself is quite a significant pressure, and it's a figure which is what we call a need figure. The white paper does suggest that there will be a balancing constraints consideration given to local authorities. So where you are significantly constrained by access to new development because of greenbelt or areas of outstanding natural beauty, then that figure would be reduced by those constraints, but we don't yet have any clarification on how that would come forward. So we don't know how that constraints figure will be calculated. For Bristol, as you'll know, we are part of the West of England Combined Authority. Most authorities that aren't part of a combined authority will be given that figure and expected to deliver it. Because we're part of a combined authority, there is an opportunity for the West of England Combined Authority to consider how the requirements for the 3 authorities within the combined authority area are distributed. So there is an opportunity to have a separate conversation through the West of England Combined Authorities SDS, through the Spatial Development Strategy, which looks at how that allocation for new homes is balanced across the sub-region. That doesn't necessarily help Bristol enormously because both of our adjoining authorities have also had significant increase in the housing need figure from this process. So it will be a challenging approach. This consultation document also talks more about first homes, and we touched on this principle earlier, that a minimum of 25% of all affordable homes would go to first homes. So as we expressed, that doesn't meet the extent of our current housing need, which for affordable homes, which is within social housing. How you raise homes against affordable housing against new sites would also change. Currently, we look at small sites to deliver homes of 10 and above. This takes it up to 40 or 50 homes. So for sites of under 40 or 50 homes, so there's an unclear figure there, there would be no affordable housing delivered explicitly from those small sites. And that, again, is intended to help smaller house builders. But as I mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily the smaller house builders who will be delivering those sites. And there's an expectation that the current permission in principle system will be extended to major development. So that's a horribly fast, rabbity run through of the consultation. There is a lot more in each of those documents than I've headlined, but those are the issues that are going to be of significant concern to Bristol. We will be putting a response through on all of those matters, and I think the encouragement here from this paper to members is to let us know issues that you would like to include explicitly in that response back, and to make responses yourselves, which of course you can do directly into those consultation events. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that very fluent and very cogent overview. I think I might have to go back and rewatch this and count how many times you said challenging.
Sorry.
It's a challenge.
Fair point.
If I'd known at the beginning, I would have started counting. Yeah, I think that's quite alarming. And if I could just remind members that one of the things we should do from this is maybe we could consider putting a joint proposal forward. We've got three hands up. Fabian, Martin, and Mark Weston. It's 8:30, so if I could just ask quick questions, please.
Yeah, I just, I think there's a couple of things that are missing. I mean, there's nothing about housing space standards. There's nothing about land banking and dealing with that. But what I really don't like about this is a really frightening power grab. I mean, Britain's already excessively over-centralised. This is basically going to centralise the planning system. We're not allowed to have plans, policies and local plans, so we can't actually address any unique or particular problems or issues that we've actually got in a locality. Neither can anybody else. There's nothing to, we need to ensure that developers go ahead, but there's also some daft ideas like fast track for beauty. Well, who decides? Supposing you're a fan,
Very subjective.
It's entirely subjective. How on earth do you decide? I might think something that's, you only have to sit on a planning committee and you see people saying, I think this is fantastic, and some people, others saying this is absolutely hideous. I mean, but I'm worried about the loss of democratic control. It's just going to completely take powers away from councils and local communities. And I really think we need to be very, very clear on what we object to and why.
I think it might be useful if members have an opportunity to go through the slides and look at particular things. So, for example, for me, one of the issues would be, how do you agree a design code? And do you even want to agree a design code? I've been looking at some of the cities in America where they've got these very rigid design codes, and we have Poundbury here ourselves. So, I mean, do we even want something like that? And then if we did do it, how would we agree it? So, I mean, I think even just itemizing the problems in it might be something that members might want to do.
And also that would stifle, having a design code could potentially stifle an architectural practice coming up with something really exciting and innovative, and effectively gifting us something with a really exciting development that we wouldn't have thought, that people drawing up a design code would never have thought of, but it is just brilliant.
Yeah, that's what it's there to try to come. Martin Fodor.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, there are so many things to be concerned about, or challenges, as they were called. And I've already, because when I read this, I was so worried. I wrote a piece that was in 24/7 a few weeks ago about it. But it's bad if we don't have funds for SIL. It's bad if people who mainly notice development when something's about to be built are told, oh, that's years too late. You should have contributed to some sort of document way back hypothetically. Who's going to get involved in hypothetical documents that might affect their street years ahead? It's bad in so many ways for our local priorities, as Fabian's just said. It really does worry me. The system's far from perfect, but if we could collaborate to show there's a cross-party set of concerns, I'd be really happy to contribute.
I think it's a really good idea. I'm not quite sure where, with the audience and purpose for it. I'm sure of the purpose, but I'm not sure the audience. But I think we could craft a document that either could be put out as a joint statement, take it to OSM, take it to Cabinet, I don't know, put it in the press. But, are concerned, and quite a few members of this committee also have a lot of experience of sitting on planning.
Of course. Yeah.
So I think if we agree with that, then I think maybe that's something that we could work on over the next week. Have a look at the slides, make some comments, and I'm quite happy if you send me comments to edit something together. Thank you, Martin.
The big worry is we don't actually know what they're going to come up with because they haven't worked it out yet.
Councillor Rourke, do you mind if I just come in? The only thing I'd say in any response is I'm sure there's lots of things in here we don't like and we have questions about. I suppose the interesting thing that I've been asked is there anything that's good in here that actually we should be directing MHCLG and government to actually work up in more detail? And if I just would like to just flag just a few, you know what I mean, rather than doing a...
Yeah, welcome to hear that.
Because some things may just fall away. But I mean, there's no doubt about it. Local plans take far too long, as anybody at Bristol City Council on the local plan working group knows. Yeah. It is a painful process. And we all lose the will to live trying to get them over the line. So there's recognition that it takes too long. What we want, though, is a way that would still have engagement that doesn't necessarily has been suggested, but the amount of evidence we need, the amount of challenge local plans get. So for me, there's a whole section about planning being more digitally enabled, which must be a good thing as well. There's recognition. So let me, if I explain in terms of how planning services are paid for, we have a lot of development management officers because people pay application fees and I can fill DM posts. I can't recruit to policy teams or design teams. And actually this paper says that that's where more emphasis needs to go. Now that could have two potentials. One, government could fund it more, or two, we have a charging scheme that recognises that policy and design are as important as development management. So I suppose I'm just giving a few of the, where would we want government or to where do we think there's actually some recognition that the system doesn't work well at the moment and that actually that's where they should be focusing getting it right? And possibly then we can draw attention to where we think actually it works okay, but just could be improved how it currently is. And I'm just saying that because I think there's a genuine receptiveness, because there's so much in here. To bring all this about would take quite potential significant change. We've got COVID, we've got Brexit, we've got lots of things impacting on planning and development moving forward. So I suppose my only plea would be, if there are elements that you do feel that actually there's something in here, that we also try and pick those up. That was just my steer.
Might be interesting to have your views on anything that we crafted. I also think, there's been a lot of kickback from the shires on this, so I'm not quite sure how far it's going to go forward, but I think it is probably worth us putting, do members think that it's, I can't see everybody, do members think that it's an idea to maybe to put a statement together? Just thumbs up or down? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So if I think the best way forward on that would be, I hear the argument that Zoe's making, which is that don't just respond in a knee-jerk way to the or so much change, it all seems horrible, because we do all know that there's a lot of things wrong with the planning process. And maybe, Zoe, it might be interesting if you had time, maybe if you just, highlighted some elements of the slide. Mark, do you have your hand up?
I do, and I've raised my hand.
Whether you were waving approval.
I was waving frantically. There are several things actually on this. I agree with an awful lot of the sentiment that's already been expressed, by the way. So I think a lot of our comments would probably be cross-party. There is actually the local plan working group that's also looking at this as well. And either they're feeding into it. I think we have a meeting next week. So I just, one of those, be careful we're not reinventing the wheel, because there might be a statement going in from them as well.
Okay.
But just to pick up, I think if we're going to respond, it's got to be structured, because like Zoe's saying, there are weaknesses in the system. So any response should talk about whether we agree that they've identified the weaknesses, regardless of whether we think their solution works, but what do we think the weaknesses are? The second thing is actually, are there any good bits in it? Now, I know someone's mentioned SIL. I actually can't stand SIL. I don't think SIL works at all. I think, when we used to have the Section 106 funding, that money was tied to a local area, whereas now 85% of SIL funding goes to the central pot. We actually had significantly greater investment pre-SIL in our communities as local councillors Maybe the council don't like it centrally, but as local councillors, we got more money from Section 106 than we ever did from SIL.
So Mark, can I just, I mean, because it's running on to 9 o'clock, and I don't want to stop you, but I mean, could you maybe put those points in?
It's 28.
Oh, I'm ahead of myself. These Zoom things really do seem to go on.
I promise I will finish very quickly.
Yeah, no, good.
And then I think once we've done that, so you know, what have they identified the problems? Are there any good bits to it? And then it's we see the challenges, and there are quite a few of them. But I'm also kind of with Zoe. And what you said earlier, I don't think a lot of this is going to survive because there is too much challenge on too broad a spectrum. And not being funny, from a government point of view, I think it'll alienate a lot of its core support that I don't see this surviving. So from our point of view, it's, are there any bits of it that we want to survive, and how do we emphasize that?
How does that sound to you, Zoe?
I think there's merit in that. I mean, you could certainly list the things that I mean, there are certain things that could, I mean, this idea of having 3 categories, growth, renewal and protector, well, probably too simplistic, but you can see the benefit that people would understand that more. But maybe, you know, in an urban area, you'd have something a bit more sophisticated as an urban mix, but you can, there's elements of it. You can see why people find and disengage with planning because it is so long, it's quite complex. Could it be made more straightforward? So there, you know, and things like fast tracking, yeah, there's some benefits of that. I mean, let's imagine if you could fast track if you were zero carbon and you met our affordable housing and you met our livability standards in our urban living SPD. You know, it'd be good if the government did have a system where actually, if you did all the right things, we could fast track easier in the system, you know. So for me, there's quite a lot. There is quite a lot in there that I think the intention's right. It's perhaps just the how it would be done. And that, to be honest, is the hardest thing. I also think this is a lot about housing, and it's not necessarily about urban and city areas. Cities are very pro-growth. Our issues are around viability, infrastructure, some of the complexities about how developers are funded. There's a lot of issues that affect development. It's not necessarily the planning system. Now, you may not be able to say that across the country, but certainly in cities and certainly in Bristol, I would dispute that it's actually the planning system that's necessarily stopping growth and development. But you only have to look at some of the real quality planning that's happened in this city.
I think Nicola would like to say something. Nicola Beach.
Thanks, Paula. Sorry, I've just sat on my hands like, oh, I really want to contribute. Thank you to all the members for contributing so far. I think if you do put something together, I don't think you can rely on Sarah's slide deck as good as it was. I do think that you need to read the white paper. It's not, you know, it's an interesting read because it's quite a harrowing read in places, but I guess when you read it, it becomes really apparent. And I was recently on a panel debate with some of the people that are on the steering group that developed this white paper, and they themselves are saying that this is not the answer. They don't necessarily think that this is the answer. This is created to stimulate a debate about what works and what doesn't work in local planning. And so to just reinforce Zoe's point, I think when you read it, you'll see that actually it doesn't offer solutions necessarily. It kind of jumps to outcomes it wants to see, and none of the process in the middle is really set out. So I left it for one with more questions than it gave me answers, even where there were answers I didn't necessarily like what it was saying. And so I think it would be good to feed into the local plan working group. There's some cross membership on this already. But I do think you almost, there's a commitment there really to read it, because it does bring to life, you know, the scale of the challenge. And the QC kit that was on the panel debate that I was sat on, it did, again, reinforcing Zoe's point, did say, well, you need to tell us what you think the challenge is and what do you think would work for Bristol, basically. And I think that's thing that is worth all reflecting on. The only other thing I'd say is that, you know, it is entirely housing focused. There's absolutely nothing about industry, employment, issues around like our challenges around the port and some of the challenges that we have elsewhere in the city. There's very little around organisations that want to do asset protection. There's huge parts of the planning system which are neglected in this white paper. And so it's not intended to be the solution, and I think it will be very, very different when we see it the next iteration of it. But I just appeal, and it's probably a repeat of what Zoe said, is it is in the response that we put together, we should be reflecting on what elements, if there are any, that we could work with in principle. And the fast track model, for me, in some respects, I think could work if it aligns with design codes and it aligns with subzonal priorities, or however we end up with. Quite similar, I guess, to the framework model that we put together for certain parts of the city.
Good. Thank you. So you think that if we, accepted that we actually do read the white paper itself, obviously we've got quite a lot of comments on this meeting this evening, which people can go back and listen to, that it would be worth putting something together to feed into the local plan cross-party working group.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I think you should feed into the working group. I obviously sit and chair on that group, and then that will in turn feed into the city's response. But as Zoe said, I think Sarah, said that as individuals, as individual councillors, as parties, you are also able to submit your consultation comments, and I don't think that would be a bad idea either. And what I don't want, sorry, and I'll be quiet in a second, Paula, but don't forget the other consultation, which is what Sarah also talked about tonight, which is the one that has got things about housing need and also the affordable limit. The QC that was on the call made it absolutely clear that their working group had absolutely nothing to do with the debate around the 10%, the over 10 being affordable versus the over 50 homes being affordable, and so that will not be covered in the housing white paper that we're now sort of predominantly talking about in terms of planning. That issue around the small sites is in the first consultation that's due to end at the end of October. So there are sort of two work streams there on the go.
Okay, thank you. Interesting points. How are we doing on this? Okay, so I think we've had quite a full discussion, and I think you're absolutely right. I have to confess I haven't read the white paper, and you've put me the challenge there now, so I will do. I hope other members will too, and then I think if we can feed some comments in, I'm happy to sort of put something together and take that forward. Okay, we're now on to, thank you for that. Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Sarah. Our final item is the work programme, which I think is just really essentially just for noting. We've talked about this work programme, I think, all summer, essentially. We do have a meeting next week on economic recovery, and then we've got another meeting. We're going to sort of divide the programme up in various different ways. I don't think I would itemise exactly what's happening here. You've got the document, you've had the document, you sat in on the meetings. If anybody has anything to say about it, I'm happy to hear it, but otherwise, I'm just checking to see if anybody's got any hands up. No, I think we're all satisfied with the work programme. Apologies for me reading my clock wrong. It just shows how long I think these Zoom calls are. I have actually in the background had a few technological problems, so I've been a bit stressed going from laptops to iPads and trying to figure things out. But anyway, it's very nice to see you all. Thank you very much for your time. I think we've got some actions to come out of tonight. I'll discuss that with Joe tomorrow. I think it's been an interesting discussion. Thank you for all your contributions and your time, and we'll see you again soon. Good night.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think it's quite a terrible headache. I've one mark. Oh, before you go.